Jake Morrison walked through the long hallway toward the biggest meeting room he had ever seen. His black uniform felt heavy on his shoulders, and his boots made small clicking sounds on the smooth floor. The data pad in his hand contained everything humanity had worked for during the past 5 years. The Galactic Council building was huge. The walls were made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange symbols covered the walls, probably writing from different alien worlds. Jake had studied many alien languages, but there were so many he could not read them all. Other beings walked past him in the hallway. Some looked almost human but had blue or green skin. Others were tall and thin like walking trees. A few floated in the air without touching the ground. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. Eva. After 10 years since first contact with aliens, seeing them still felt amazing. Lisa Carter walked beside him. She was Earth's best diplomat and had spent months getting ready for this day. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat style, and she carried a briefcase full of documents. She had practiced her speech so many times that Jake could probably say it from memory. Behind them came Dr. Helen Brooks and Commander Paul Stone. Helen was a scientist who studied alien life forms. She was small and quiet, but she knew more about alien biology than almost anyone on Earth. Paul was a military officer with gray hair and serious eyes. He had fought in the war against the Krex Raiders 3 years ago. The 4 humans were Earth's hope for joining the inner circle of the Galactic Council. This was the most important group in the galaxy. Only the strongest and smartest species could join. If humanity became a member, they would get access to amazing technology, protection from enemies, and trade with the richest worlds. They reached the main doors of the council chamber. The doors were 20 feet tall and made of metal that looked like liquid silver. When they opened, Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The room was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. Thousands of seats filled the space, arranged in a giant circle. In the center was a small platform where speakers would stand. Above everything, a huge dome showed the stars outside, making it feel like they were floating in space. Jake had seen pictures of this room, but being here in person was completely different. The air smelled like flowers and metal at the same time. Strange music played softly from speakers he could not see. The temperature was perfect. Neither hot nor cold. Most of the seats were filled with representatives from different alien species. Jake counted at least 40 different types of beings. Some were huge and covered in scales like dragons. Others were small and had too many arms. A few looked like they were made of crystal or light. The humans walked to their assigned seats near the front. Jake noticed that many aliens were staring at them. Some looked curious, others seemed bored, and a few appeared to be laughing quietly to themselves. Lisa leaned over to Jake and whispered, "Remember, we just need to present our case clearly. The facts speak for themselves." Jake nodded, but he felt nervous. These beings had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Their technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic to humans. Their cities covered entire planets, and their ships could cross the galaxy in days. What did humanity have to offer them? The answer was in Jake's datapad. Over the past decade, humans had proven themselves useful in many ways. They were good at solving problems that other species found difficult. When the Mellon Corporation had a labor dispute that stopped their mining operations, human diplomats had found a solution in just 2 weeks. When the aquatic Malorians faced crop failures on their desert colonies, human farmers had developed new growing techniques that saved their people from starvation. Humans were also brave. During the Vorthan research expedition to the dangerous Omega Nebula, human volunteers had risked their lives to save alien scientists when their ship was damaged. During the pirate attacks on the frontier zones, human patrol ships had fought alongside alien forces to protect innocent colonies, but most importantly, humans were adaptable. They could live on worlds that other species found impossible. They could work with anyone, learn any language, and find ways to get along with beings that had nothing in common with them. A deep sound filled the chamber like a bell ringing underwater. All conversation stopped. At the center of the room, a platform began to rise from the floor. On it stood High Council Speaker Morazeth. The leader of the Galactic Council. Morazeth was ancient, even by alien standards. His people had founded the Galactic Council 10,000 years ago. He was tall and thin, with skin that looked like old leather and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the huge room without any need for microphones. "The Council recognizes the delegation from Earth," Morazeth said. "Captain Morrison, you may present your species' request." Jake stood up and walked to the center platform. The metal surface was smooth under his feet, and he could feel the eyes of thousands of beings watching him. He looked up at the dome showing the stars and thought about Earth, small and blue and far away. He thought about the billions of people back home who were counting on him. Children who dreamed of visiting other worlds. Scientists who wanted to learn from alien teachers. Farmers who hoped to feed hungry populations on distant colonies. Soldiers who wanted to protect their allies. Jake activated his datapad and began to speak. His voice was steady and clear. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he said, "I stand before you today representing the human species of Earth. We come not as conquerors or supplicants, but as partners ready to contribute to the greater good of the galaxy." He began to present the evidence of humanity's worth. He showed videos of human diplomats solving complex disputes. He displayed data about human agricultural innovations that had helped feed struggling colonies. He presented military records showing human courage and loyalty in battle. For 30 minutes, Jake spoke about humanity's achievements. He talked about their exploration of dangerous regions, their rescue missions, their research contributions. He explained how humans had already proven themselves valuable allies to dozens of species. Lisa followed with economic projections. She showed how human membership in the inner circle would benefit trade, create new markets, and strengthen the galaxy's economy. Her presentation was filled with charts and numbers that proved humanity's potential. Dr. Brooks spoke next about scientific cooperation. She explained how human researchers had already made important discoveries working with alien scientists. She showed examples of successful joint projects and proposed new research initiatives. Finally, Commander Stone presented humanity's military capabilities. While modest compared to some species, human forces had proven themselves reliable and effective. They had never betrayed an ally or broken a treaty. As the presentations ended, Jake felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence was strong, the arguments were logical, and humanity had truly earned their place among the stars. Then he noticed something that made his stomach drop. Many of the alien representatives were making soft sounds. At first, Jake thought they were talking among themselves. But as the sounds grew louder, he realized the truth. They were laughing. The laughter started quietly, like distant thunder. Jake Morrison stood on the platform in the center of the council chamber, still holding his datapad. At first, he thought maybe he was hearing wrong. But the sound grew louder and clearer. They were definitely laughing at him. The first to laugh openly was Valkorath, the representative from the Xanthari Empire. His body was made of living crystal that sparkled under the chamber's lights. When he laughed, his crystal form rang like breaking glass. The sound was sharp and cold, filling the huge room. "Humans want to join the inner circle," Valkorath said, his voice carrying through the translation system. "These baby mammals who just learned to fly between stars want to sit with the ancient powers of the galaxy." More laughter joined his. The aquatic Malorians made gurgling sounds that might have been funny in other circumstances. Their fish-like faces showed clear amusement as they spoke to each other in their water bubble breathing masks. Jake felt his face grow hot, but he kept his expression calm. Behind him he could sense Lisa Carter's anger. Though she also kept her face neutral, Dr. Brooks was gripping her datapad so tightly her knuckles turned white. Commander Stone looked like he was ready to fight, but he stayed in his seat. High Chancellor Zixnara of the Hegemony Council stood up. She was tall and had 4 arms, each ending in hands with too many fingers. Her skin was pale purple, and her eyes were completely black. When she spoke, her voice sounded like music, but her words were cruel. "Captain Morrison," she said, "your species has been in space for what, 50 of your Earth years? My people have been traveling between stars for over 2,000 years. The youngest species in our inner circle has been exploring the galaxy longer than your entire recorded history. The laughter grew louder. Jake could hear dozens of different alien voices joining in. Some made sounds like birds chirping, others like rocks grinding together. A few species communicated through flashing lights, and their representatives were blinking rapidly in what was clearly alien laughter. "You are infants," Zixnara continued. "You play with toys you do not understand. You think because you have learned to build simple spacecraft and establish a few small colonies that you are ready to join the great powers of the galaxy." General Thekor of the Vorthan military rose to his full height. He was huge, at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that looked like armor. His people were known as the best warriors in the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice was deep and threatening. "Your military forces," he said, "could not defend a single star system against one of our patrol fleets. Your weapons are primitive, your ships are slow and weak. You think you can contribute to galactic defense when you cannot even protect your own colonies from space pirates without asking for help." The Vorthan delegation behind him made sounds that might have been their version of laughter. It sounded like growling mixed with hissing. Jake wanted to respond, to defend humanity's accomplishments, but he knew it would only make things worse. He had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, and he recognized when he was surrounded by superior forces, a new voice joined the mockery. The ethereal whispers were beings made of pure energy who rarely spoke at council meetings. When they did communicate, it was usually something important. But today they spoke only to insult humanity. "Young humans," their combined voice said, "sounding like wind through leaves, return to your small blue world, learn for 1,000 years, study the ways of the galaxy. Perhaps then you will understand why your request is so amusing to us." The laughter continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Jake stood through all of it, his back straight and his face showing no emotion. He had learned this skill during his military service. Sometimes the best response to an enemy was to show no reaction at all, but inside he was burning with anger and shame. Not shame for himself, but shame for these beings who called themselves civilized. He had seen how they treated younger species, how they looked down on anyone who was not part of their exclusive club. During his years as Earth's representative, Jake had attended many council meetings. He had watched as the inner circle members made decisions that affected millions of beings without asking for input from the species who would be most affected. He had seen them refuse help to struggling colonies because those colonies were not important enough to matter. He had also seen how they treated their own people. The Xanthara used slave labor in their crystal mines. The Vorthan military conquered smaller species and forced them to serve in their armies. The Hegemony Council ruled their territory with fear and violence. These beings thought they were better than humanity because they were older and more powerful. But Jake knew that age, and power did not make someone wise or good. Sometimes it just made them cruel. The laughter finally began to die down. High Council Speaker Morazith raised one of his thin hands for silence. The ancient being looked at Jake with what might have been pity. "The Council has heard your presentation," Morazith said. "We will now discuss your request and reach a decision." Jake nodded and returned to his seat. The human delegation sat in silence while the alien representatives talked among themselves. Jake could hear bits of their conversations through the translation system. Most of them were still making jokes about humanity's request. "Did you see their military data?" one alien said. "They have fewer ships than we use for training exercises." "Their technology is so primitive," another added. "They still use chemical rockets for some of their space travel." "I heard they only discovered faster than light travel by accident," a third voice said. "They found an abandoned alien ship and copied the technology." Jake closed his eyes and tried to block out the voices. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who were counting on him. He thought about the human colonies that needed protection, the research stations that needed better technology, the trade routes that could make life better for everyone after An hour of discussion, Morazeth called for order. The chamber fell silent as the ancient being stood up again. The Galactic Council has reached its decision, he announced. The request from the human species for membership in the inner circle is denied. Jake felt his heart sink, but he was not surprised. The decision had been obvious from the moment the laughter started. The Council finds this request premature by several centuries, Morazeth continued. Humanity lacks the experience, technology, and wisdom necessary for inner circle membership. The alien representatives nodded in agreement. Some were still making quiet sounds of amusement. However, Morazeth said, the Council recognizes humanity's enthusiasm and potential. We offer instead a provisional outer membership. You may continue your current level of trade and cooperation. You may participate in selected cultural exchanges and research projects. In time, perhaps your species will develop the capabilities necessary for greater responsibility. It was a gentle way of saying that humans could remain as junior partners, always dependent on the mercy of their betters. Jake understood the message clearly. Humanity would be allowed to exist on the edges of galactic civilization, but they would never be considered equals. Jake stood up and walked back to the center platform. Every eye in the chamber was on him as he prepared to respond to the Council's decision. The aliens probably expected him to argue, to plead, to show the emotional instability they believed was typical of younger species. Instead, Jake simply nodded. The human delegation accepts the Council's decision, he said. We thank you for your time and consideration. And with that, he turned and walked away from the platform. Lisa, Helen, and Paul followed him without a word. The four humans gathered their materials and headed for the exit. As they walked through the chamber, Jake could hear the aliens resuming their conversations. Most had already forgotten about the humans and moved on to other business. After all, what could such a primitive species possibly do that would matter to the mighty Galactic Council? Jake Morrison smiled quietly to himself as he walked through the tall doors. They were about to find out. 2 weeks after the council meeting, Captain Bob Harris was working late in his office on the human colony ship New Hope. The ship was stationed near the Bellin asteroid mining operation, where humans had been helping solve worker disputes for the past year. Bob was reviewing reports when his communication system buzzed. Captain Harris, we have an incoming message from the Bellin Corporation, his assistant said. They want to schedule a meeting about the mining dispute. Bob looked at the message on his screen. The Bellin aliens were having the same problem they always had. Their workers were unhappy with working conditions and production had stopped completely. Normally, Bob would have arranged a meeting within hours. Human diplomats had solved this exact problem 3 times before, but today Bob did something different. He deleted the message. Sir, his assistant said, should I respond to the Bellin Corporation? No, Bob said quietly. We will not be taking any more meetings with them. His assistant looked confused, but Bob did not explain. Instead, he sent a message to all human ships and stations in the sector. The message was simple. Effective immediately, all voluntary cooperation with Council species is suspended. Continue only activities required by existing treaties. The same scene was happening all across the galaxy. On the human research station orbiting Kepler 442, Dr. Mary Johnson received a similar message. She was in the middle of important research with Vorthan scientists working on new medical treatments that could save millions of lives. Mary looked at her research notes and her alien colleagues working beside her. The Vorthan scientists were brilliant, but they thought in straight lines. It was Mary's creative approach that had made their breakthrough possible. Without her unconventional ideas, the project would probably fail. She gathered her personal belongings and walked to the Vorthan team leader, a tall being named Kexvorth. I am transferring off this project, Mary said. My replacement will arrive next week to handle the remaining work. Kexvorth looked surprised. Dr. Johnson, we are so close to a breakthrough. Your unique perspective has been invaluable. Why are you leaving now? Mary smiled politely. Personal reasons. I'm sure you will do fine without me. She left the station the next day. Her replacement was a competent scientist, but he only followed standard procedures. He had none of Mary's creative thinking or willingness to try impossible ideas. On the outer rim of the galaxy, Captain Nina Foster was flying her merchant ship through the dangerous Kepler Nebula. The nebula was full of cosmic storms and hidden asteroids that could destroy a ship in seconds. Most species avoided it completely, but human pilots had learned to navigate it safely. Nina had been running regular patrols through the nebula for 2 years, helping any ships that got into trouble. She had saved dozens of vessels from different species, always refusing payment for her rescue services. But today, when her sensors detected a distress signal from a Malorian cargo ship, Nina did something that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. She turned off her radio and changed course. The Malorian ship would have to wait for official rescue services, which might take days to arrive. Many of the crew might not survive that long, but Nina followed her new orders without question. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Human agricultural experts stopped answering calls from struggling colonies. Human mediators canceled scheduled peace talks. Human rescue ships went silent on emergency frequencies. At first, the council species did not notice. They were too busy with their own important affairs to worry about what a few humans were doing. But as days turned into weeks, the effects began to show. The Xanthari crystal farms, which had been producing record harvests using human-developed techniques, saw their yields drop by half. The human experts who had taught them the new methods were gone, and the Xanthari workers could not remember all the details. Vel Korath, the Xanthari representative who had laughed loudest at the council meeting, found himself staring at production reports that made no sense. His people had been mining crystals for thousands of years, but somehow they had become dependent innovations. "Where are the human consultants?" he asked his production manager. "They have all returned to human space," the manager replied. "They said their contracts were complete." "Get them back," Velkorath ordered. "Offer them more money." But when the Xanthari tried to contact the human experts, they received polite but firm responses. The humans were not available for new contracts. They were focusing on internal projects. The aquatic Malorians faced an even worse problem. Their desert colonies were facing complete crop failure. The special growing techniques that humans had developed for high-salt environments were incredibly complex. Without human guidance, the Malorian farmers were making mistakes that killed entire harvests. Thousands of Malorian colonists were facing starvation. The council species had food to spare, but transporting it to the remote colonies was expensive and difficult. The humans had been providing free assistance for years, but now they were nowhere to be found. High Chancellor Zixnara tried to reach the human agricultural experts directly. Her message was returned with a simple reply. "The Terran Federation regrets that all agricultural specialists are currently assigned to internal projects. We are unable to provide external consultation at this time." The Vorthan military, despite their proud boasting, discovered they had their own problems. 3 separate supply convoys had been attacked by pirates in the past month. Normally, human patrol ships would have provided early warning and assistance. But the human ships had stopped their volunteer patrols. General Thekor, who had mocked human military capabilities, found himself looking at casualty reports that showed the difference human cooperation had made. The human ships were small and weak compared to Vorthan warships, but they were fast and clever. They had been preventing attacks that his larger ships could not stop. "Contact the human fleet commander," Thekor ordered. "Ask them to resume patrols in the disputed zones." The response came back quickly. "Human patrol ships are needed for defense of Terran space. We cannot spare vessels for external operations." As the weeks passed, the problems grew worse. The Outer Rim Rebellion, which had been simmering for years, suddenly exploded into violence. The Human Intelligence Network, which had been providing crucial information about rebel movements, had gone silent. Without human mediation, 3 different species that had been close to peace agreements returned to warfare. Without human rescue services, dozens of ships were lost in dangerous regions that had been safe for years. The Council species began to realize something that should have been obvious from the beginning. The humans had not been asking for charity. When they requested Inner Circle membership, they had been offering partnership for years. Humans had been quietly holding together dozens of relationships and operations across the galaxy. They had been the mediators, the problem solvers, the ones who showed up when nobody else would help. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was falling apart. Ambassador Kevin Ross, who had replaced Lisa Carter as Earth's representative, continued to attend required council meetings. But he was nothing like the warm, enthusiastic humans who had come before. He was professional, polite, and completely distant. When council members approached him for assistance, Kevin would smile and say, "I'm sorry, but that falls outside my official duties. Perhaps you should contact the Inner Circle members for help." The message was clear. The humans had tried to join the Inner Circle and been rejected. Now they were following the council's advice to focus on their own development. Council Speaker Morazeth found himself in the strange position of trying to understand what had gone wrong. The humans had accepted the council's decision without argument. They had not protested or demanded reconsideration. They had simply withdrawn, but their withdrawal was causing more damage than a military attack. The humans had been involved in so many aspects of galactic civilization that their absence was felt everywhere. As he sat in his private office, looking out at the stars, Morazeth began to understand the lesson humanity was teaching. Power was not just about having the biggest ships or the most advanced technology. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was walk away. The Council had laughed at humanity's request to join them. Now, as crises erupted across the galaxy, the laughter had died completely. In its place was a growing fear that they had made a terrible mistake. The humans had left without a word, and their silence was becoming the loudest sound in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the council meeting, and the galaxy was burning. Not with fire and explosions, but with the slow collapse of systems that had worked smoothly for years. High Council Speaker Morazeth stood in his private office reading reports that painted a picture of disaster spreading across known space. The Xanthari Empire was facing its worst economic crisis in centuries. Their crystal production had dropped so low that they could barely meet their basic trade agreements. Velkorath, who had laughed so loudly at the human delegation, now spent his days desperately trying to understand the growing techniques his people had used for years with human help. How did we become so dependent on them? Velkorath asked his chief engineer during their morning meeting. The engineer, a veteran crystal farmer with decades of experience, looked embarrassed. "Sir, the humans taught us so many small improvements over the years. Each one seemed minor, but together they made our yields much higher. Without their guidance, we are making mistakes we did not even know were possible." The aquatic Malorians were facing something even worse than economic problems. Their outer colonies were dying. The desert worlds that had become productive farms with human help were now returning to wasteland. Entire settlements were being abandoned as crops failed, and water systems broke down. The Malorian government sent emergency food shipments, but it was like trying to fill an ocean with a bucket. The colonies needed the expertise that only humans could provide, and the humans were not responding to any requests for help. Commander Zek Melos, who oversaw the colonial territories, found himself staring at evacuation orders. Worlds that had supported millions of beings would soon be empty. The cost of the emergency operations was bankrupting his government. What about hiring human consultants as private contractors? He asked his staff. "We tried," his aide replied. "They said all human agricultural experts are committed to projects in Terran space. None are available for outside work." The Vorthan military discovered that their problems went far beyond simple patrol support. The humans had been providing intelligence, logistics coordination, and strategic planning that kept their entire operation running smoothly. Without human input, their supply lines were failing and their response times had doubled. General Thakor, who had boasted about Vorthan military superiority, was now dealing with 3 active rebellions and a pirate problem that was growing worse every day. His forces were stretched thin, and morale was dropping as casualties mounted. "Sir," his intelligence chief reported, "the Outer Rim Rebellion has spread to 5 more systems. They seem to know our troop movements before we make them." Theckwar slammed his scaled fist on the table. "How is that possible?" "Our communications are secure. The Human Intelligence Network used to provide early warning about rebel activities," the intelligence chief explained. "Without their information, we are operating blind." But the real disaster was happening in the civilian sectors. The humans had not just been helping with big military and economic problems. They had been involved in hundreds of smaller operations that kept daily life functioning across the galaxy. The space traffic control system in the busy Centauri sector was falling apart. Human coordinators had been managing the complex flight patterns that allowed thousands of ships to travel safely through the crowded space lanes. Without their expertise, there had been 17 major accidents in the past month. The medical research station orbiting Rigel 7 was struggling to maintain basic operations. Dr. Mary Johnson and other human researchers had been working on treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Their replacement scientists were competent, but they lacked the creative thinking that had made the breakthroughs possible. Even worse, the humans had taken their research data with them when they left. Years of work had disappeared overnight, leaving alien scientists with incomplete projects and no way to continue. The breaking point came when the Hegemony Council's main trade hub experienced a complete system failure. The complex computer networks that managed billions of transactions across dozens of worlds had been partially designed and maintained by human technicians. High Chancellor Zix Nara watched in horror as her economic empire began to crumble. Trade. Ships could not dock because the automated systems were malfunctioning. Financial records were being corrupted. Communication between different sectors was becoming impossible. "Get me the human technical team," she ordered her staff. They left. 3 months ago, her aide replied. "Their contracts expired and they said they would not be renewing, then hire new ones, pay them whatever they want." "We tried. All human tech specialists say they are working on internal Terran projects. None are available for hire." Zix Nara felt something she had never experienced before: fear. Her 4,000-year-old civilization was being brought to its knees by the absence of a species they had dismissed as children. The emergency council session was called by Morazov himself. Representatives from all the major species gathered in the Great Chamber, where the humans had been humiliated 6 months earlier. But today there was no laughter. "We face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history," Morazov announced to the assembled delegates. "The withdrawal of human cooperation has created cascading failures across multiple sectors." Velkorath stood up, his crystal form no longer sparkling with amusement. "My empire is facing economic collapse. We need human agricultural expertise. Immediately." "My colonies are dying," added Commander Zakmelos. "Millions of beings may have to be evacuated." General Theckwar looked grim as he delivered his report. "Military operations are failing across 3 sectors. We have lost more ships in the past 6 months than in the previous 5 years combined." The reports continued for hours. Every major species had similar stories. The humans had been so thoroughly integrated into galactic civilization that their absence was felt everywhere. "How did we not see this?" asked the representative from the Crystalline Consortium. "How did we become so dependent on such a young species?" Morazov had been thinking about that question for weeks. "Because they made themselves useful," he said quietly. "They found problems we did not know we had, and solved them without being asked. They improved our system so gradually that we stopped noticing what they were doing." The truth was painful to admit. The council species had been so focused on their own superiority that they had ignored the quiet competence of their human partners. They had taken human help for granted, assuming it would always be available. "What do they want?" asked High Chancellor Zix Nara. "Surely they will negotiate." "Everyone has a price." But Ambassador Kevin Ross, who attended the session as Earth's representative, had already made the human position clear. When approached by desperate council members, he responded with the same polite but firm message. The Terran Federation is currently focused on internal development, he would say. As the Council advised, we are taking time to learn and grow before seeking greater galactic responsibilities. The message was clear. The humans were following the Council's own advice. They were concentrating on their own civilization instead of helping others. If the Council wanted human assistance, they would have to change their attitude completely. Some Council members suggested using force to make the humans cooperate. But General Thackwar, despite his earlier boasting, admitted that human space was now surprisingly well defended. They have been building up their military for months, he reported. Their ships are still smaller than ours, but they have formed defensive alliances with several younger species. An attack would be costly and might push other species to join them. That was perhaps the most frightening development of all. The humans were not just withdrawing from galactic affairs. They were building something new with species that the Council had also dismissed as unimportant. The Kepler Federation, formed by humans and 6 younger species, was offering the kind of cooperative partnership that the Council had always claimed to represent but never actually practiced. Member species were treated as equals regardless of their age or military power. We created this problem ourselves, Morazeth finally admitted. We treated the humans as junior partners when they were actually essential partners. Now they have shown us what the galaxy looks like without them. As the Council session ended without any solutions, the representatives returned to their homeworlds to face growing crises. The humans had taught them a lesson that no amount of technology or military power could overcome. Sometimes the most devastating weapon was simply walking away. Outside the Council chamber, Ambassador Kevin Ross prepared his own report for Earth. The message was short and simple. Phase 1 complete. They are beginning to understand. The humans had not left in anger or spite. They had left to prove a point. And that point was becoming clearer every day as the galaxy struggled to function without them. The Council had laughed at humanity's offer of partnership. Now they were learning what it meant to lose partners they had never realized they needed. 1 year had passed since the Council meeting, and High Council Speaker Morazeth found himself doing something he had never done in his long life. He was preparing to apologize. The great chamber where the humans had been humiliated was nearly empty now. Many Council species were too busy dealing with their own crises to attend regular meetings. Those who did come looked tired and worried. The confident arrogance that had filled this room for thousands of years was gone. Morazeth looked at the data on his personal screen. The numbers told a story of galactic civilization slowly falling apart. Trade was down 60%. Military conflicts had tripled. Dozens of colonies had been abandoned. 3 entire species were facing economic collapse, and in the middle of all this chaos, the humans were thriving. Reports from the Outer Rim told an incredible story. The Kepler Federation, led by humanity and 6 younger species, was growing. Stronger every month, new colonies were being established. Trade between member worlds was booming. Their combined military had successfully stopped 2 major pirate fleets that the Council forces had failed to defeat. Most shocking of all, other species were asking to join them. The Akuan Collective, the Frontier Alliance, and even some Council members were sending secret diplomatic missions to human space. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "the human delegation has arrived." Morazeth nodded. After months of careful negotiation, the humans had finally agreed to meet with the Council. But this time, things would be very different. Jake Morrison walked into the chamber wearing the uniform of an admiral. Beside him came Lisa Carter, now Secretary of State for the Terran Federation. Dr. Helen Brooks wore the insignia of the Kepler Federation Science Council. Commander Paul Stone was now a general, but they were not alone. Representatives from 12 other species walked with them. These were the younger races that the Council had always ignored or dismissed. Together they represented an alliance that controlled almost a quarter of the galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the human delegation took their seats. But this time they were not sitting in the junior section near the front. They had been given equal status with the inner circle. Members. Morozeth stood to address them. His voice, which had once carried absolute authority, now sounded tired and uncertain. Admiral Morrison, he began, the Council wishes to discuss the current crisis affecting our galaxy. We believe that cooperation between our civilizations could benefit everyone. Jake stood slowly. His face showed no anger or satisfaction, just calm professionalism. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the chamber without any need for amplification. High Council Speaker, Jake said, the Terran Federation and our allies appreciate your invitation. However, I must clarify our position. We are not here to rejoin the galactic community as junior partners. We are here as equals. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The idea of treating humans as equals was still difficult for them to accept. Vel Korath of the Xanthari Empire spoke first. His crystal form looked dimmer than it had a year ago, reflecting the economic problems his people faced. Admiral Morrison, he said, the Xanthari Empire wishes to propose a partnership agreement. We can offer advanced technology in exchange for agricultural expertise. Jake looked at him calmly. What kind of partnership are you proposing? A standard council relationship, Velkorath replied. Your people would provide consultation services and we would provide payment and technology transfers. So you want to hire us? Jake said. The same way you hire any service provider. Well, yes, Velkorath said, sounding confused. Is that not acceptable? Jake shook his head. That is exactly the relationship we are trying to move beyond. The Kepler Federation is built on mutual cooperation, not service contracts. Members contribute according to their abilities and receive according to their needs. High Chancellor Zixnara leaned forward with her forearms folded. Admiral Morrison, surely you understand that different species have different capabilities. Some naturally take leadership roles while others provide support. Yes, Jake agreed. And we have learned that leadership is not determined by age or military power. In the Kepler Federation, leadership rotates based on expertise and situation. Sometimes humans lead, sometimes our Aquan partners lead, sometimes our Rigelian allies lead. The concept was revolutionary for the Council species. They had always believed in fixed hierarchies based on military strength and technological advancement. The idea that a younger species might actually lead older ones was almost unthinkable. General Thekor stood up, his scaled hide showing the scars of recent battles. Admiral Morrison, the galaxy faces serious security threats. Surely military cooperation is more important than political philosophy. General, the Kepler Federation has successfully defended our territory against every threat we have faced. Our combined fleets have defeated pirates and raiders that Council forces could not stop. We have done this through cooperation, not domination. But you need our protection, Thakor insisted. Your forces are still small compared to ours. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. General, I think you misunderstand the current situation. 3 of your member species have already requested to join our federation. Your own military is stretched thin across multiple conflicts. What protection are you offering exactly? The question hung in the air like a weapon. Everyone in the chamber knew the answer. The Council could barely protect itself, let alone offer security to anyone else. Dr. Helen Brooks stood up to address the science concerns. The Council has also lost significant research capabilities, she said. Our joint projects have produced more breakthroughs in the past year than most Council institutes achieve in a decade. How is that possible? Asked the Crystalline Consortium. Representative, you have access to less advanced equipment. Because we share information freely, Helen explained. When the Aquan researchers discover something new, they immediately share it with all Federation members. When our Rigelian partners develop new technology, everyone benefits. We do not hoard knowledge to maintain advantage over our allies. The Council members looked at each other with growing unease. Everything the humans described went against thousands of years of established practice. But the results spoke for themselves. Ambassador Kevin Ross, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. The Council seems to be operating under the assumption That we want to return to our previous relationship. That is not why we are here. Then why are you here? Morazov asked. To offer you the chance to join something better, Kevin said. The Kepler Federation is open to new members. Any species that agrees to our principles of equality and cooperation is welcome. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The humans were not asking to rejoin the council. They were inviting the council to join them. You want us to abandon thousands of years of tradition? Velkorath asked. We want you to abandon thousands of years of failure, Jake replied calmly. Look around this chamber. Half your members are dealing with crises that cooperative solutions could have prevented. Your rigid hierarchies and competition have made you weak. Morazov felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Everything Jake said was true, but accepting it meant admitting that the council's entire way of life was wrong. And if we refuse? Morazov asked. Jake shrugged. Then you refuse. The Federation will continue to grow with or without you. We are not trying to destroy the council. We are simply offering a better alternative. The human delegation began to gather their materials. The meeting was ending, but not the way anyone had expected. Wait, Morazov called out. What are your terms for membership? Jake paused at the door. Simple equality. No senior partners, no junior partners, no hierarchies based on age or power. Every member species gets one vote regardless of their military strength or technological level. Decisions are made by consensus, not by the strongest forcing their will on others. And existing council members? Morazov asked. Would be welcome as individual species, Lisa Carter replied. But the council as an institution would be dissolved. We are not interested in reforming an old system. We have built a new one. As the human delegation left the chamber, the remaining council members sat in stunned silence. The species they had laughed at a year ago had just offered to let them join as equals in something they had created outside the chamber. Jake Morrison looked up at the stars visible through the dome. Somewhere out there, the Kepler Federation was growing stronger every day. New species were joining regularly, drawn by the promise of true cooperation. The council had laughed when humanity asked to join their exclusive club. Now humanity had built their own club, and it was better than anything the council had ever imagined. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was leading that change not through conquest or force, but through the simple revolutionary idea that all intelligent species deserved to be treated as equals. The council's laughter had stopped. In its place was the sound of a new future being born.